And it's 3:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Everyone's had an opportunity to review the agenda as well as the addendum to the agenda. Yes. And are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Going once, twice, 3 times? Okay. And we have the previous minutes from our budget. And could I have someone move that these business minutes be accepted? See Jim's finger.
I'll move it. I'll move that, Madam Mayor.
And Betty Ann seconds. And all in favor? Carried. And is there any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we have no public presentation, so we'll move right into administrative reports. Our first report is from our treasurer, and you'll notice that on the treasurer's report, there are 5 parcels to that report. So I'll let Sue take the floor, and Sue, you can walk us through it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so welcome back to our next budget committee meeting. We are in this proposed extra committee meeting that was outside of the scope of our budget policy, but thank you all for agreeing to this. We do have a number of things that we need to review at this meeting that we didn't get to at the last meeting, and some further information that we were asked to provide to the committee. So some of the things that we have attached included in your package are, again, this was part of the council presentation, but again, the September 30th, 2020 year-to-date actual summary versus budget, as well as the September 30 budget variance report. So I don't know if anybody has any questions related to the budget variance report, but this would be the time that we would address those questions. We've also given you, as was requested at the last meeting, the 2020 reserve and reserve fund listing. And I've attached a copy of our operating surplus deficit policy, which we will talk about at a future slide. And we will also be talking about later on the proposed 2021 municipal user fees. So all of that information was part of your agenda package, and a few other things as well we'll talk to as we go through. So are there any questions with respect to the 2020 budget variance report?
I have one, Sue.
Sure.
Looking at the variance report, I believe it's for the Blind River Dam. I don't see any revenue on there at all.
We do not budget for revenue there. The revenue, quote unquote, from the dam would show up as a credit on the hydro bill at the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? While you're continue to think about that, just our current projection is that we're in a really good place. I know there's been some concern that maybe we are not doing as well as we would hope, but my current projection is that we will be ending the year with a surplus. I'm not going to put a number on it. It's too early for that. And once a number gets put to it, I get that my feet held to the fire about that. But as we get closer to year end, if you look at the summer report for September, you'll see that our revenues are about $2.8 million more than our expenses at the end of September. We are not going to end the year with a $2.8 million surplus, but we will have money left at the end of the year. And just for councils to remind the committee and council, we do have a policy that deals with how we would handle a year-end surplus. And the recommendation that we would follow that policy when we get to the end of the year. I know there's been some discussions possibly about looking to reduce next year's tax rate with some of the surplus from this year. That's not recommended. We know we have a huge infrastructure deficit. We should have been putting money, the town in the past should have been putting money into reserves. That didn't happen. So we really need to build up our reserves as best we can so that we can start to address some of the issues that we have.
Sue, it's Jim again.
Yep.
Is this the place where, like, let's say I'm looking at the Sani dump. If we're to increase the fees, is that going to transpire in another place in this meeting?
Yes, that will be when we get to the user fees, the 2021 user fees, we will have that discussion.
Okay, great.
Paula?
My question is just with the big reserve that we have at the end of this year, would that be partly because we didn't get things done that maybe needed to get done this year? Would we not roll that out to next year then?
Yeah, so if there's a big project that we didn't get completed this year, absolutely, we would roll that into next year, but we would roll the funding through our prior year reserve. So again, that money would still go into reserve over year end. We would do the project next year. Some of it is money that we had set aside from the tax levy that for grants that we were not successful in obtaining. So the tax funded portion of those grants, that money may be available to reallocate to different projects next year through the reserves, but it would go into reserve over year end, and we would allocate it to new projects in the new year.
Thank you.
And just to further expand on that, some of that savings will be from facilities being closed and not having the expenses there that we would have had.
Yes, that is another place where we're going to see some savings because we were so unsure as to what was going to happen. I think departments were really careful about not spending if they didn't have to. And because facilities were closed, we're also going to see some savings on utility bills. So that's going to be the other place we're going to see a lot of savings. And it's not anything that we've done except the facility was closed. So they weren't running the lights, they weren't running the gas to keep the place warm or whatever. So there'll be some savings there. And all of those will be detailed. Once we get to year end, we'll have a detailed report as part of the fourth quarter reporting that I will do to council to show where all of those savings were and what the proposal is to do with any surplus that we have. Are we okay with everything else so far? We're good to move on? Okay. So the 2021 budget, and my hope today is to get some direction from the committee, some commitment to some baseline numbers that we can build into the 2021 budget so that we know what else we're working with, what numbers we need to be working towards. Just some other things, just a refresher of what we know. I know we've been telling you about this for quite a while. The government has been telling us this at every conference we've attended, every meeting we've had. Our OMPF funding will be the same for 2021 as it was for 2020. We did receive the official paperwork for that now, just confirming what they've been telling us all along. So we do know our OMPF funding will be $2,621,000. We know our OPP contract costs are going down. MPAC is staying the same. Physician recruitment, actually, I just got a new number from the mayor today. It's actually going down to $9,592. And as far as we know so far, Algoma Public Health and ADSAB are staying at the same levels as 2020. And as was previously mentioned to the committee as well, wages as per the union contract are going up 1.65% for 2021. Approximately $64,500, and there was a question about what our wage budget was for 2020, and that was just over $1.9 million was our wage budget for 2020. So we're going up a little bit over that. So what did we hear from the last meeting and some responses to that? So tax rate increase anywhere between 2% and 3.8%. So based on our 2020 levy, a 2% increase would give us an additional $118,800. Up to 3.8% would give us $225,700 in additional tax levy funding based on our 2020 assessment values. There may be some growth. MPAC was supposed to continue to process subs and omits, so we may see a little bit of increase, but just based on our 2020 assessment, that's what those tax rate increases are going to give us additional funds to spend in 2021. So depending how much you want to spend, that's what those numbers will give us. And I'm not looking for a final commitment on that number right now. There will be some recommendations that I'm looking for committee support to build into the 2021 budget. We can leave the actual tax rate until we know some more about what our other numbers are. Facilities, and concentrating on facilities that are a priority. Town hall, public works, the fire hall, the arena, the courthouse, and we'll talk more about the courthouse, the tourist information center. There was a report from the CAO that was attached at 7.2 with just some basic facility overview. We attached some of the sheets that we had from Tulloch. But we are recommending, and that's in the report as well, that an amount of $100,000 be earmarked from the tax levy for 2021 to address facilities related issues. And that as additional projects are identified and prioritized based on the Tulloch engineering reports, that those projects be funded from the facilities reserve. There is one other funding piece that just became available. It's attached as correspondence to this document, but we did receive word that the ISIP COVID-19 resilience stream funding has been announced, and the town of Blind River is eligible for $100,000 in funding. So we do need to apply. There's a list of eligible projects or facilities that money can be used for, the municipal hall being one of them. So as part of this review, we will identify what makes the most sense to apply for that funding and use that $100,000 outside of this $100,000 and outside of the facilities reserve money. So it's another $100,000 that we would have available to spend on facilities.
Just question, Sue. The $100,000 that we're looking to earmark is from the facility. Is it from the facility reserves, or is it going into the facility reserves? And like, is that $100,000 like split up amongst all our facilities?
So we were looking for $100,000 from the tax levy in 2021 for specific facility projects, and those would be identified based on the priorities. As we work through the Tulloch engineering reports, we would identify what makes the most sense for that first $100,000. And then anything else, we would be looking to the facilities reserve, which I believe has about, at this point, about $673,000 in it, possibly more, because we would allocate some of our 2020 surplus to that reserve. So there would be additional funds. And then the other $100,000 from the ISIP is on top of that again. That would be grant funding.
Fantastic, thank you.
At this point, though, I think we need to probably jump to the addendum and talk about what we found at the courthouse yesterday. You can see the pictures here, and I'm going to actually turn it over to our CAO to discuss her conversation with the engineers about the courthouse building.
Yeah, so this was not a nice surprise that we've discovered at the building. To clean this up and to mitigate the damages for the limited services that are in the building may be cost prohibited. And it may be a good time for us, for council, to make a decision on whether we keep the entire building or not. One of the recommendations from staff was going to be to demolish the old Public Works garage, so the area that's just outside of the town office, leave the courthouse building, and then demolish the cold storage building that is contaminated with pigeons living in there. With discussions with the engineer, just an overview discussion, some of the immediate needs of that building were going to be roughly $100,000, and that was before this occurred. Now with this occurring, the $100,000, and then taking a look at demolishing because the building shares services with the municipal office as well. And so when we take off the two sides, the two garages that are no longer in use, to repair the walls on each side, we're looking at roughly $75,000 per side to seal it up and make it watertight. So if we look at redoing all of the windows, all of the facade needs to be cleaned up and done something with. That could be just cosmetic. But the interior work that is required in the building is going to be quite costly and quite expensive. And this may be the building that we are looking at. We also are receiving quite a few complaints through Access 11 with regard to property standards of our own facility. It has looked very tired and not attractive as a facility that is owned by the municipality when we are trying to enforce property standards around the community. So at this point, based on Mr. Kirby's email, I think the recommendation here would be to look at providing the services that are captured within this facility at other locations, and proceeding with a complete demo of the facility.
Councillor Wells?
Well, thank you, Mayor Hagman. I guess my question is that if the courthouse building is no longer usable, we've had this discussion before, but do we have another facility within the town of Blind River that would be suitable for court proceedings? I think the last time we talked about this, we really felt because of certain requirements that we really don't have another building. So I just wondered if there is any other place here, or whether court would just be suspended, held in Nullet Lake until such time as we could provide a new facility. Like, I'm not sure where we stand with regard to relocation.
Okay, so I can answer that. So where we stand currently with this facility is court services are not permitted to be held in the building currently because we're not up to code with regard to COVID. And I think we're going to see a lot of building code changes come out of COVID, specifically with HVAC. That being said, I am in discussions currently with the leaseholder, which is CBRE, in looking at housing the service from another location. They are not limiting us to having the same type of service that's available now. So they are open to looking at the community center as a possible option that would be a temporary service in that location. So it wouldn't be that we would be losing the service. Now, that being said, this just happened yesterday. I'm just now in discussions with CBRE. So I would like to bring all of those options forward to council.
Councillor Jay Dunbar?
Thank you. Yeah, I was very disappointed to see this here. I have like two questions. One was the courthouse closed at the like not being used? And that's my first question. Was it closed up? And is this why you know, we went 7 or 8 days before finding this out?
So the leakage actually comes from the upstairs space, which is usually vacant other than the snow plan is up there once a week. So when she arrived, that's when she found the issue. We have been doing spot checks of the building, especially because we did find some heating irregularities, I believe 2 weeks ago when we found the heating irregularities. So the building is not checked daily, but it is checked.
So this wouldn't be something where we could have or should have turned off the water on the building at this time?
We couldn't turn the water off because we do have a tenant that uses the upstairs office.
Right. And I guess my last question, Katie, my second question is, So we have no insurance at all for this year mess?
We do have insurance, and I am working with the adjuster on that now. But I guess the cautionary issue with this is, do we go through insurance and raise our rates if we're looking at not carrying forward with this facility?
Right.
So that's where I'm looking for direction, because bringing in insurance at this point is going to raise our rates.
Katie, do you know what the cost would be for demolition of the courthouse and as an inclusion with the public works sides of the building?
I don't have a full number on that yet. I have asked Telic Engineering to provide that to me. They are working on that, and we have a scheduled in-person meeting next week to go over all of those details.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on the courthouse?
I believe Councillor B.A. Dunbar is waving her hand, Sally.
Sorry, I'm only seeing 4 on my screen right now.
That's okay, Sally.
Sorry, Councillor Dunbar, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hagman. I know how difficult it is to try and see all of us at the same time. My only question is, do we need to be concerned about creating brownfields by demolishing the courthouse and the garages?
We have to look at all of the options. All of those things will be done through the demolition plan done with the engineer. Either way, we have to do something with it. So if it is a brownfield, we still have to do something with the site.
So we need to be mindful of that as well.
Yes, that's on our plan, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And are there any other questions? Seeing none, back to you, Sue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other thing we want to talk about is the Tourist Information Center. And at this point, I would like to give the floor to our Director of Facilities and Community Services to talk about what possible plans for the travel center might be for moving forward. Karen?
Hello, everyone. I'm just trying to get my video going here. Okay, hi, everybody. Okay, so the travel center, based on previous meetings from council, there seems to be quite an appetite at having those pulling off the highway be greeted with a stellar first impression of what Blind River can offer. Whether it be to start a business, to learn about what the community can offer for recreation, our trails, the fact that we are a year-round entity, capitalizing on our shoulder seasons while generating some revenue responsibly. So what I've done is compile almost a short list concept of what that facility can truly do with a slight reorganization of how the services are offered. So I have mentioned in the past that we've been doing quite well at the Wave consignment shop. It's bringing revenues to Timber Village Museum. And what we'd like to do is create a sister store on land with similar consignment items to not only reduce the impact of initially buying stock, but making sure we're supporting our local artisans who council is very aware are struggling, especially through the pandemic. We need to make sure we are retaining these valuable members throughout Algoma. We want to provide information to travelers, but not just have them walk in the door where they grab a pamphlet and then head down the highway. We want to encourage them to enjoy what Blind River has to offer. Our bike trails, our outdoor rink, our shopping downtown, the services that are in our stores downtown, the services that are along the highway. And be a direct contact to Town Hall. You never know the lead or the contact that could be coming into that facility. Maybe they're looking for a new home. Maybe they're looking to go skating. Maybe they're looking for maple syrup, or maybe they're looking to bring a business here. So we need to have somebody at the door and at the helm who's ready to link that person to the appropriate member of the town hall staff. Again, a pop-up museum. So what we've done is bring some of the artifacts from Timber Village Museum to that space so we can use it as a simple segue for our summer staff to be able to have an easy way to bring our visitors from the highway down to the waterfront. So we know our student staff need coaching, which is it's great, we know this, But it's much easier for occasional workers to have something very simple in the room to point to and start talking and have that conversation piece. And then it's a simple segue to send them down to the waterfront, send them to the marina, send them to the boom camp. On the way they pass our downtown, they can have lunch. All of these great spin-offs come from it, but we need to have a tool that our kids can use while they're at work and feel confident in it. A welcoming face that is a true community ambassador. So we know our workers, when they are empowered with information, are more, how can I word this? They're more likely to share it when they're excited about it and they understand it. So making sure that our community ambassadors have walked our trails, making sure that they know when the outdoor rink is up and going, making sure town hall and that staff member are sharing information on an ongoing basis. And then also assist with authoring grants, welcoming guests, and making sure leads of any type reach town hall. And if any counselors have any questions on how we plan to execute this, I am more than happy to answer it.
Councillor Wells.
Well, thank you, Karen. Listening to your presentation, it sounds to me as if you foresee this facility as being a four-season stop and not just a place for summer travelers. Are you anticipating that we would have someone staffing the building all year round so that they could direct visitors to various facilities?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Wells. Yes, if council has the appetite, in a perfect world, we would have a full-time person in there, because Blind River, and this is shown through multiple reports, is missing out on its shoulder seasons. And sometimes we forget the impact that winter recreation has on our economic stability. We have snowmobiling, we have skiing, we have snowshoeing, we have a multitude of activities, including ice climbing, that happen in our area. We are incredible. The North Channel frozen is just as stunning as it is thawed. And if we can capture the attention from people that are passing through year-round, that only increases our odds of expanding both our resident base as well as our business sector. So the short answer would be yes.
Councillor Jay Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Karen. It's well put together here for us. And I always believed that this was council's will, always with this place. And you've brought to light on how we can utilize this now as a four-season spot. But we do all know that there is some, I believe, some money to be spent on this here facility. And this will probably be coming up into the budget, because I believe we had a lengthy report from Crescent at the time on this, and you are privy to the Crescent's report, correct?
Yes, Councillor Dunbar.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Karen? Councillor Pastorero?
So would the full-time employee be potentially the EDO, or would this also house potentially the EDO and a full-time employee?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Pastorero. This can happen in several different ways. Right now, you have two brilliant staff members working down at the marina that have transformed, we'll say, a lackluster gallery experience into something that's quite phenomenal. And that talent is ready to start putting their services to a sister store on the highway. So by liaising with each other and using the pre-existing tools that the museum has developed between those two curators, they're able to develop something quite exceptional. But if it is the desire of council to have an EDO in that same area, there are two workspaces that can be designed.
Councillor Pastorero?
So I guess follow up to that. So Ms. Bintner, are we then talking about the employee that we had down at the marina that was in transition due to the return of another staff member, and this could be possibly a perfect relocation for that staff member?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Postero. Yes, if council is in agreement, and just to share with council as well, that staff have placed an application to continue that staff member's service with us, so we can continue to offset the tax pressures, and then council can ensure they're reallocating as many dollars as possible to infrastructure projects. So we are working on that to assist as well.
I don't see any more questions, Ms. Bittner, so thank you so much for that information on the travel center. Oh, am I missing someone?
Jim's hand is up.
Oh, sorry, Jim. Went to the other screen. Go ahead.
That's all right. That's all right. So Karen, then there wouldn't be any budget implications then whatsoever since we've already had this staff member employed with us, correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Dunbar, the museum has presented a budget to council for approval for 2021, which includes that staff member. So if your question is if it's additional on top of the museum's ask, then no. And then that ask is decreased in the event we do get funding. I hope that's clear.
Yep, very clear. Thank you.
Just to clarify, though, that budget has not yet been presented to the committee. That will be the next meeting where the draft operating budget will be presented to the committee.
Councillor Summers.
I just had the question. We had talked about Chamber of Commerce before. Would there be any thoughts of doing something with them, maybe with this as well?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Summers. What we would like to revisit is the great relationship we have with the Chamber with liaising summer students. So what we can do is work together as a team to recruit stellar summer staff, and then the Chamber can be applying for one, the town can be applying for one, and then we can make sure we have the services in the event someone is ill or needs time away. Given the courthouse information that you've received today as well, I am working closely with Snowplan. So we are going to be viewing that facility tomorrow as it is listed as the staging site. So more to come there, and that will be ready for the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm just doing a scan to see if I see any hands here. And seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Bittner.
You're welcome.
And back to Sue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The one other piece related to facilities that was included was just a brief information report for the committee, just to show the Palace Theatre and what it has been costing the town over the last few years. One of the things that did come up out of the service delivery review, not many, or if any, municipalities provide a theater service to their residents. This is one of those pieces. It does cost taxpayer dollars. I just wanted everybody to be aware of what those numbers were. Again, it'll come up as part of the operating budget discussion at the next meeting, but I just wanted to have that information in front of the members of the committee for your information. So before we move on to the next section, we did have a couple of recommendations that we can get committee support for. We will start to build these numbers into the 2021 budget for presentation at the next meeting. And those would be that we earmark $100,000 from the tax levy for facilities still to be prioritized, and that the new option for the new thing from the addendum to pursue options for court services and a proposal for possible demolition of the current facility, and support for the proposal for the Tourist Information Center. So if the committee is in support of those three things, we will see if we can, how much of that we can actually work into the 2021 budget as it relates to facilities.
And council, is there anyone who is not in support of doing those three things?
Madam Mayor?
Yes?
Yeah, it was the courthouse, the Tourist Information Center, and what was the third one?
The earmarking of $100,000 from the tax levy.
Okay, thank you.
And are there any other questions on this recommendation?
And this is just really a baseline. If we get to a point where we think we can actually allocate more money to any of these projects, we will, but I need some baselines that we can start to build the budget from and know that this is the minimum service level that the committee and the council are willing to accept. So I just need some initial guidance so we can start to build the budget based on some numbers. So if we will start with these numbers, and at the next meeting, we'll have further discussions about the actual budget and what the implications might be.
So Sue, maybe we can split the motion into 3 areas, and we can give you a show of hands, if that would be all right.
Oops. I mute myself. Yes, that would be fine.
Okay, so all in favor of the 100,000 tax levy being utilized for facilities? And that's carried.
Do you need a mover for this, Madam Mayor?
Yes, I do. And can I call on you, Councillor
Yeah,
Denver?
absolutely,
Thank
absolutely.
you. And Councillor Summers will second. Thank you. And for the motion for, I mean, I've lost that screen, sorry. The money that is to be looked at for the demolition or movement of the courthouse. Could I have a mover? Councillor Posterero, and seconded by Councillor Summers. And all in favor of this motion? And that is carried. And then the third one would be the looking at the reserves. Correct, Sue?
Travel center, no?
Just
Yeah.
want to make sure we've got I want to make sure, how would you word that motion?
If you want one for the reserves, it would be that additional projects be funded from facilities reserve as they are identified and prioritized.
And can I have a mover on this motion? Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor B. Dunbar. All in favor of this motion? And that is carried. Thank you.
And then there would be one fourth one if the committee wishes us to include the Tourist Information Center proposal in the operating budget.
Mhm.
And that is moved by Councillor Summers, seconded by Councillor Posterero. All in favor of this motion? And that is carried.
Thank you. So that is facilities. So moving on. So the next section we talked about was our paved roads and our 5-year road plan. What I heard at the last meeting, I was a little unsure. Are we continuing at our current funding level? Are we increasing our funding levels slightly? Are we maintaining our current PCI? Those are 3 very different things. So just some numbers before we move on to the next slide. Our total 2020 tax funded capital was $1.36 million, up from 1.309 in 2019. Our target for 2021 for total tax funded capital projects would be $1.4 million. If the consensus is to maintain our current PCI, that means that for the next 3 years, our entire tax funded capital would only be spent on paved roads. We would not be able to address any other infrastructure issues out of tax funded capital if the wish is to maintain our current PCI. If we maintain our current spending, so our 2020 spending for paved roads was $300,000. If the wish is to maintain that $300,000 spend over the next 5 years, you're looking at a decrease in our PCI of approximately 2% per year over the next 5 years. If we were going to increase that funding slightly to $500,000, Again, still decrease in the PCI over the next 5 years, but not as high, 1.6 to 1.8% per year. And if we were to go to 750,000 over the next 5 years, again, still a decrease, but not as significant. Obviously, the Director of Public Services report on paved roads that was deferred from the Infrastructure Services meeting was attached for the committee's review. But it is our recommendation that $500,000 be allocated from the tax levy for paved roads in 2021, and that this amount be increased annually and a target be set for that annual increase, whether that be 5%, 10%, I don't know what that number is yet. And that staff be directed to apply for any grants that become available to help address this infrastructure deficit in 2021 and future years.
So you're looking for recommendation, discussion first.
Yeah.
Any comments? I saw Councillor Wells first, followed by Councillor Jay Dunbar, followed by Councillor Postrero, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor Hagman. Sue, I guess my question is, we're talking allocating money for improving the paved roads, but we're not talking about any infrastructure work that will have to be done in the older parts of town with regard to sewer lines and water lines. So we would also have to take into consideration that if we were to refurbish, repave one of those roads, we would also be looking, as we did in Michigan, I think 4 years ago, that we would have to look at not only resurfacing, but also replacing the existing infrastructure.
You, Madam Chair, yes, Councillor Wells, that is correct. There may be roads that we would also need to look at the infrastructure under the ground as well as just the roads. And that would require additional funding above and beyond this. This is strictly for road surface and paved road surface. The unpaved roads would still be covered. We still have that program that's still funded by our federal gas tax. That program will remain intact, and that funding is sufficient. We're just really talking about our paved roads at this point.
Councillor Jay Dunbar?
Yeah, maybe, Andy, can you explain a little bit to me about that this amount be increased annually? Should this maybe amount be discussed to be increased annually, or are we kind of held by voting on this that we're giving permission to increase this annually?
The intent is that as part of each year's budget discussion, we would discuss an increase to this amount, but it would be anticipated that just like we have a targeted 3.8% increase each year to our tax funded capital, we would have a targeted increase to our roads. So whether that's the same 3.8% increase each year, but it was always subject to discussion and approval by council before that would be, it would never be assumed. It would always be at the approval of council.
Thank you, Sue.
And Councillor Postrero?
And that percentage of our funds is based on the fact that we would have a 3.8% increase. Because if I'm thinking about what councillors were saying that they wish the tax rate to be was in the 2s to 3. So if we did only have an increase in taxes of 2 to 3%, then that money would be significantly decreased. And I definitely agree that the 500,000 would be the best way to go. And I think another reason for not, for having the potential to increase or decrease it each year is not binding future councils into the amount that we select this year. So I guess my only question is, so how will that impact if we reduce the desired tax increase?
That would depend on what other expenses the committee and council wishes to see in the 2021 budget. We may have savings on the operating side that would allow us to still increase our tax funded capital by 3.8%. That is the number that came from our asset management plan. We didn't just pick 3.8% out of the air for targeted increases for tax funded capital. That was recommended in the asset management plan. So it may be that we need to find savings in operations in order to maintain that, or we may not be able to make that target of 3.8% annual increases, but we have to start somewhere with a number that we think and then see where we end up. It's all subject to negotiation. And it is still significantly less than what we should be spending on infrastructure, right? To maintain our PCI, we're still talking, it should be $1.4 million. So $500,000 is really just a small drop in the bucket.
So Sue, you're looking for a motion from council on this recommendation.
Yes, if the committee supports allocating $500,000 from the tax levy for paved roads in 2021, we will start with that built into the capital budget.
Do I have a mover from council that would move the $500 be allocated from the tax levy?
Did you have another comment, Jim?
Yeah, I had a question.
Oh, okay, sorry. I move screens and then the hands go up. Councillor Dunbar, go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe just for clarification on the 3.8% increase, this is not what our increase on tax levy is going to be. This was our increase on this funded capital project, correct, Sue?
Yeah, this is not necessarily what the tax rate increase will be. This is what
Right.
our tax funded capital increase will be. And if we want to maintain that 3.8%, we may have to reduce operating expenses to compensate, or we may not make the 3.8% increase. That's a target. It's not set in stone.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Councillor Dunbar. That clarifies things.
I thought that's where you were going with it.
And Councillor Postrero, did you have another question? No, okay. And do I have someone that would move the 500,000? Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Jay Dunbar, and all in favor of this motion? And that is carried. Thank you.
The next thing we talked about at the last meeting was related to water and wastewater and how important this is for potential growth within the town of Blind River. Also knowing that we need to plan for a new alternate water source. We also heard some discussions about possible rate increases to our water and wastewater rates. Again, we are recommending, and this is included in the draft user fees, which we will get to later, but the asset management plan did say that we should be increasing our water rates by 5.4% annually and our wastewater rates by 8.5% annually. What that means for wastewater right now, our wastewater rates are 50% of our water rate. So if you spend $100 for your water, you're spending $50 for your sewer. Changing that to 8.5, increasing the wastewater rates by 8.5% means increasing that from 50% to 51.5%. So a slightly different calculation on calculating the wastewater rates than is currently. The other thing that has also been brought up is the need to consider a capital levy specifically for water that would be charged to the water users. Potentially one for wastewater if we need additional funds there, but it has been made very clear in discussions that the town needs to be seen to be doing everything they can and using all the tools available to them to raise funds for these projects. So a capital levy specifically related to funding the alternate water source would be a step in that direction. And if we are going to do that, it should also include vacant lots that are within the serviced areas. Obviously, at some point in the future, there should be houses built on those lots, and they're going to be taking advantage of the new water source. So they should also be paying towards the funding of that. And the other thing to note is there will be in the 2021 operating budget, we are required to do our 10-year drinking water system financial plan in 2021. So there will be costs associated with that.
So I'm opening it up to the floor for discussions on this item. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Mayor Hagman. Sue, this may have been discussed at a previous meeting when I was absent, but just for clarification, based on information we received from the delegation to the provincial conference in January, I think my understanding is that we had to be seen as attempting to find funding for these projects if we expect to receive provincial funding in return. Is that basically what we're talking about?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, yes, that's what we're talking about. That would be the capital levy. That would be how we were trying to raise funds for our portion of this project, should additional funding become available.
And other questions related to this topic? Councillor Dunbar. I want you to do a dance. I'm just waiting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with a water increase of 5.4 this year and a wastewater increase of 8.5 gives us the 50% and 51% 0.5. Weren't we increasing these significantly over the last 3 or 4 years, even before we decided to go with a delegation? Like, what have our water and wastewater increases been over the last few years? Because I just find this a little bit high.
We proposed last year to increase the water and wastewater rates by these amounts, and council defeated that and kept it to, I believe it was 3%, which is what it has been for the last number of years.
3 for water, Sue?
Yeah, and subsequently 3 for wastewater as well, because it's 50% of the water rates.
I'd split the difference and go 4 and 4.
Just a quick question. When we went for the delegation, we were encouraged to use these water rates, were we not, Katie?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's correct. They encouraged us to use our drinking water financial plan. They encouraged us to continue to update that plan and to look at other revenues, because the water and wastewater are a utility and should be borne by the utility, excuse me, the utility user, and not the full tax base.
And so if we were going to go to another delegation, unless we use the this increase, we would probably be turned down again.
I couldn't
Councillor
answer
Dunbar,
that directly, but it is a possibility.
Councillor J. Dunbar?
Yeah, I realize that's a possibility, but you also must realize that we're never going to be 100% funded by the people of Blind River on our water and wastewater. That's just not going to happen. I mean, unless you have some magical numbers or something that I'm not aware of, but I can't see that happening ever for this town where we're at right now with the population and the people who are on fixed incomes. You know, we're going to need a lot more growth and a lot more commercial tax base and industrial tax base before we ever get, you know, to that point. So seeing a raise on it, you know, from 3 to 4, I mean, we're moving in the right direction, but I just feel that these are a little heavy right now. I know it gets us to those percentage marks, but that's my opinion.
Thank you. And Councillor Pastorero?
I was just wondering if there was a figure in mind where we have considering the capital levy. Is there a potential figure that anyone had in mind for how much that levy would be per user?
Not at this time. We have not spent any time looking at that because we were unsure of support for such a levy. But if there is support for a levy, then potential amounts can be calculated and brought back to the committee.
And are
Sorry.
there any other questions? Sorry,
I have a
I'm playing around with this screen that has gone.
Okay.
green.
I just have a
Okay, I
comment,
see-
really.
I see Councillor B. Dunbar.
Paula's ahead of me, so let Paula go. She's been
Okay.
waiting for some time for comment.
You would not believe what my screen looks like right now.
Yeah, I can. Go ahead, Paula.
I just have a comment that I think we need to do some education with the town of Blind River as far as water and wastewater. I don't know that we're actually getting the word out there on what needs to be done. Because I mean, I don't pay for water, but I just saw a bill of somebody else's and I was like, oh my goodness, I thought it was pretty high myself. So I think we need to really, really look at education for the townspeople so they know exactly what we're talking about here. Because I think the capital levy is something that we should definitely look at, but we just can't just, you know, throw the increases in there and then slap a capital levy on top and not even have any discussion with the townspeople to give them information as to why we're doing this.
Yes, good point. And Councillor B. Dunbar.
Yes, I just wanted to say too that I think this is absolutely the wrong year to be throwing huge increases at our residents. Even if we're going to have surpluses this year. So if we have surpluses and we have these huge increases, I don't think the optics of that is very good either. I just don't think it's a good year to put large increases. I would go, like Jim said, with a 4%, split it in half for this year. And I agree with Paula. I think we need to have an education blitz on this as well.
So what I'm hearing is we won't go for a delegation, 4%, and educate the public.
Why wouldn't you go for a delegation?
Well, I just know that they said if we didn't go for the full amount, that we would probably be turned back.
They use those numbers, 5.4 and 8.5?
And Katie's got her hand up, and then Councillor Posterero.
So through you, Madam Mayor, to you, Councillor Dunbar. No, they didn't use those exact numbers, but they did say that our increases had not been high enough in the past. And understandably, I mean, all councils of the past did not want to raise the water so significantly. However, the past should have been looking at allocating the costs of the water and the sewer to the users, and that wasn't done. So unfortunately, we're at a position where this council and future councils have to look at how we're going to manage the development of a new water source, which is needed, and the development of possibly an increase to the wastewater. We can keep putting it off year after year and keep inching up year after year, but each year, as we all know, costs go up. So if we're not attaining that level that's there through the drinking water financial plan, and I can note that the current drinking water financial plan that was developed, I believe, in 2012, the revenues that were projected from there are substantially lower than we actually have received. And the reason being is that it was based on prior to the full implementation of the water meters. So once the water meters started to be used, people decreased their use of water. So the revenues went down as to what was projected. So we do have a lot of work to get to. Certainly we understand that, you know, the decision of council of increasing the water by such a large amount is not a good decision or an easy decision to make, but not making some increase and some progression towards the end goal is going to probably delay the project of implementing. Now we will know more after this year and after the engineering review through the SEMA engineering group of what that is actually going to look like. So We could defer that and go with a 4% increase if that's the direction of council or the budget committee. But then we really need to seriously look at these financial plans moving forward, and we need to look at what the recommendation of SEMA is going to be on what the actual costs are going to be for this service.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pastorero first, then back to Councillor Jay Dunbar.
I'm also in agreement with the other councillors that are saying that's too steep of a jump, especially this year when many users are being gouged with their electricity bills under the false disguise that they were going to be reduced when in actuality they were increased. So I think that the 4% this year is more palatable. But what if we did a 4 and 4 and then had a 1% levy?
And your question is directed to Sue.
Would that be more palatable for getting a delegation if we're showing that we're increasing our fees, and say next year we increase it another percent and move to 5 and 5 and look at the levy? But would 4 and 4 and a 1% levy be more appealing to achieving a more successful delegation?
I can't answer that question. What I would say though is that our wastewater costs are more than 50% of our water costs. So I would like to see a bigger increase on the wastewater side than on the water side, just to start to bring the funding for wastewater more in line with the expenses. It's up to the committee to decide. These are the numbers that were recommended in the asset management plan. If I had to guess, I would say that when we do our 10-year drinking water system financial plan, those increases are going to have to be higher than this. But it's up to the committee and council to decide. If you want 4 and 4, we can do 4 and 4, but know that we're sliding farther and farther behind with our infrastructure.
Just one point before I turn it to you, Councillor Dunbar. I don't know if council wants to consider 2021 is a non-election year. 2022 is an election year. Usually councils try and lower on an election year as opposed to raise. So just food for thought. So if you were thinking of raising to 5% in an election year, you may not want to do that, but I'll leave that for decisions. And over to you, Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so I mean, with Sue's explanation there, I could see 4 on the water and 5 on her wastewater, as she mentioned. This is my own personal thought, but back to Councillor Summers and education. Maybe I can be educated here. What about the hundreds of people? And she mentioned that she personally doesn't pay for water or wastewater. How are the hundreds of people incorporated into the town? Let's say if we were to get a new water source which brought in motels and some other commercial ventures where that adds to our base. Do not the people outside of the hub who aren't on the wastewater and water, don't they benefit also? You know, from our town services? Like I didn't know that they didn't pay for. So anyone outside, anyone without water or wastewater, they don't pay this increase, Katie?
So, well, only the water user pays for it. So for example, those in Forest Glen don't have the sewer. They only have water. So they're not paying the increase of the wastewater, they're only paying for the water. If for example, Councillor Summers lives outside of our serviced area, therefore she does not pay the water or the wastewater. She doesn't have the service.
And just to comment that, don't forget, I pay for water because trust me, I pay a lot to get water into my house as well as I pay to have my sewage dealt with as well. We still pay money. It's just, it's in a different way.
Not to the
You-
town.
Not to the you're not taxed, yeah.
So I'm hearing from council, 4% water, 5% wastewater. Is this correct?
I go with that.
Councillor Wells?
Well, just two comments. I appreciate the fact that by not following this guideline, as our treasurer has said, we are, no pun intended here, treading water, or we're not moving forward the way we should be. But when we had the delegation at the AMO conference in January, that was pre-pandemic. And it might be very easy for government officials to say, well, do this, do that. But now that we are under the pandemic and we have local businesses and residents who are dealing with other problems caused by the pandemic and local businesses that use water, I think we should be cautious about creating a situation where those businesses can no longer function in our community. And with regard to increasing rates in an election year, I think we should, as town officials, our priority should be what is best for the community, not what is best for our future re-election. Like, that doesn't bother me at all. But I agree with the other councillors that we have to take into consideration the fact that this is not a normal year. And as we saw announced today by the Premier, dealing with another, I think it was 1,300 new COVID cases, granted in another part of the province. But we also had to bear in mind that we need to act in a prudent way for the benefit of our taxpayers, at least during this critical time.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Would council like to put forward a figure so that we can move to a motion? Along with education, which we definitely will do with the public. I'm not seeing any hands, so can I step in and I heard four.
Betty Ann, her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Betty Ann.
I would go with the 4 and 5.
I was just gonna say that.
That would be, yeah, 4 and 5.
Okay. Everyone, can I have a seconder to the motion of 4 and 5? Councillor Jay Dunbar. And all in favor of this motion?
Well, Madam Mayor, may I ask for a recorded vote, please?
Sure.
Deputy Mayor Summers,
In favor?
Councillor B.A. Dunbar,
In favor.
Councillor J. Dunbar,
In favor?
Councillor Wells,
In favor?
Councillor Posterero,
In favor.
and Mayor Hagman,
In favor.
and that's carried.
Oh, Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hagman. Now, we've just talked about water and wastewater, but we haven't considered the levy, have we not?
I will turn it over to Sue, but I believe we were just dealing with the wastewater and wastewater right now, and then we're moving on to user fees.
Okay, Madam Mayor, yeah, so I guess the recommendation would be for staff to look into a capital levy and make some recommendations as to what we think that needs to be. We don't have those numbers. We didn't have support for that capital levy until potentially now. So we have not done any investigation, but we could for the next meeting come back and have some recommendations as far as what the capital levy should look like or could look like.
And Katie, go ahead.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, is that, I guess what Sue's asking, just to clarify, is that an appetite of the Budget Committee to look at a levy before we investigate all of that work, and there is no appetite for a levy?
A good point.
And Council, what is your feeling about looking at a capital levy as it relates to water? Sorry, Councillor B. Dunbar?
I can't honestly answer that question without having some scope within which I can think about. Like, I mean, are we talking, you know, yeah, I need some numbers to actually answer that question. Like I said, are we talking about 1%, 10%? You know, are we talking, like, I need something to actually, numbers to think about in order to answer that question.
So I guess to clarify then, do you have an appetite to put a 1%, for example, levy on a project where we know our wells are drying up? We know that we need a new water source. Are we interested in having a levy for this capital project, or is it something that you want to continue where we're, you know, looking at subsidizing it through the tax rate?
Just a question, maybe instead of doing a percentage, we could do like a certain amount a month per, like throughout the year, so that each, I don't know, like just for easy sake, like $10 a month extra on your bill for the next 12 months. And that would be the levy per user or whatever, however the bills go out. Something to that effect too. We could look at something like that maybe.
Yes, a flat rate per lot or per property could be a consideration. The other thing too is we don't know at this point what our actual cost is going to be for that water source, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't start to plan ahead. We know it's going to be expensive. We just know it is. So it would be prudent to at least start somewhere now, and then once we start to get more numbers, we can look at increasing what that rate is. But I guess we're just looking in general for support of the concept, and if there is support for the concept, then we can start to look at options, whether it's a flat rate, whether it's a percentage, what the numbers might look like based on our current users and current number of lots within the serviced areas.
And again, this would help us with it, with a delegation.
Yeah, I would be interested in that. I mean, even just knowing how many users that would be, like if it's a certain amount per month, then times however many users, just to get an idea of like what that cost would look like.
So Sue, do you have enough information on that you can take back?
There's a few other people with their hands up, Sally.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Pastorero.
And Councillor Wells as well. So I was just going to say that I definitely have an appetite for a levy because like Deputy Mayor Summers said, we need to educate the citizens of what's going on with the water situation. We do need a new source. And as well, as Sue said, we need to be prudent. So I think it would be financially irresponsible that if we're not willing to raise those water and wastewater rates to the level that they should be, that we should at least look at a minimal levy that will help us to plan for the future.
Thank you. And sorry about that. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mayor Hagman, and thank you, Councillor Pastorero, because I almost gave you credit for the education comment. But as Councillor Summers pointed out, education is also part of the key here. I think people would not really understand why we've suddenly imposed a levy unless we explain the reasons why. And as we know, we spend money frequently on the rehabilitation of the wells that are gradually becoming less functional, and that we also spend a lot of money on chemicals and other products at the wastewater plant to treat the water that we're drawing from the wells, and that a new water source may be an initial significant cost. Over time, it would provide us with a, I hate to say unlimited source of water, but certainly a dependable source of water that probably would require less treatment, and then there will be a savings as a result. So, but I think if the people don't understand the logic behind the levy, we just say we're going to impose a levy, they'll have no idea why we're doing that, other than just seeing it as as a cash grab or whatever. They need to understand the reasons behind it. And perhaps when we have the public meeting, if we're talking about levies then, that should be made clear. But I'm not sure how many people even attend the public meeting, so we should be looking at a way to get that message out to our water users. Perhaps if it's imposed, that could be information that will be included in a water bill that they receive.
And we could also include through our information session in February, something along those lines of education. Needless to say, not everyone shows up, but we can certainly try, as well as having sheets. Councillor Summers, I see you.
Well, it's not only just for the, not only just for the levy, but just for the water as a whole. I don't think people realize what it costs to get that water into their taps. We hear lots of nagging about, you know, the pressure's bad and all the other different things, but I don't think they realize what it costs to get that water to them. So I think it might be an eye opener, and maybe, you know, they might look at it a little, especially when we're increasing the rates.
And that could also take place at the open meeting on the 19th. And Councillor Jay Dunbar, you have the most beautiful palm of your hand.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was probably well said there, Councillor Wells and Posterero. The education is a big part of informing the public, and your hopefully your scenario that you mentioned, Madam Mayor, would, you know, give an opportunity to do that. But I'm 100%, as Councillor Summers said, like what it costs to put that water to their taps. It's not only that, it's also the reports that we were privy to, and they're not, I don't believe they were in-camera reports on versus going the same route we are right now and providing a new water source. Like the money that we're spending is phenomenal on well upgrade, chemicals. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And that's all part of the education part of this here. So absolutely, well said, councillors. I'm in agreement with you.
Are there any other points for discussion before we go to the recommendation of the having Sue exploring the rates and options for council to consider for users in lieu of a tax levy? Going up and down, I think we're okay. So Sue, you're okay to provide this information for us?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And on to proposed user fees. Oh, Sue, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so user fees were provided in your package. I don't know, do you want to go through them by, we can start, just go through them in order by facility. If there's any questions, most of the department's heads are here to respond to any questions related specifically to their user fees. Was there anything specific related to Parks and Recreation user fees?
Councillor Jay Dunbar?
What item are you on for with the user fees right now? We're not on 7.1, are we?
7.5.
1.5.
Okay. Sorry about that. I only had one thing for the user fees, Sue, and I know there's a lot of them, but I mean, I wanted to see the user fees go up at the Sani dump. And I don't know what you have here, under what section that is under.
So the Sani dump fees are under water and sewer. We are currently at $10 per use. I am proposing going to $12. I have done some research along the North Shore and where I can find fees. A lot of the campgrounds, it's free if you stay on site, if you're a guest at the campground, and there's a fee if you're not. Most of those fees are not posted, unfortunately, but where I can find fees, it's anywhere from $7 to $15 per use. There is one Sani dump in Elliott Lake that is free for everybody. Bruce Mines is $7. The provincial parks are $14. So the fees bylaw is proposing an increase from $10 to $12 for this year, or for 2021.
Okay, well, as long as I thought it needed to go up. I mean, you pay $2.50 to put air in your tires now. And you pull into any gas station, and even here at our own gas station, it's $2.50 for air. So $12, I still think you're getting the deal, but at least we're going in the right direction. And I'll leave it at that.
And I'm seeing Councillor Posterero's knuckle, so I'm assuming that's a
Sorry, that's me scrolling through eScribe. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So no question from Councillor Posterero, so over to Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mayor Hagman. This is a question with regard to user fees, the Park and Recreation. Actually, I'm looking at the community center, and maybe the director of facilities could tell me about the 5+ game tournament rate. That's something new that's being proposed.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Wells. That fee isn't new. Those are just old notes from last year, so I do apologize we didn't clean up that spreadsheet. What that was to encourage local usage to create tournaments in Blind River. And we see that every March with an adult tournament that happens at the arena. And we've also seen developments with Timbits or the under 7 gang creating those type of tournaments. So we'd like to keep that fee intact with a slight increase so we can encourage users at home to stay close to home and develop fun while following Hockey Canada specs.
Thank you, Karen.
My apologies, I thought I cleaned up most of those fees that were new last year and are no longer new for 2021. I missed those ones.
Are there any other questions for Parks and Recreation? And seeing none. For animal control, are there any questions on animal control fees?
Sorry, Sally, I just had a quick question for Ms. Bittner, I believe. With the arena, did we used to have a substantial number of schools booking, because this year there will be none?
Madam Mayor, to Council. Sorry.
Unless they book the outdoor rink.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Posterero. It wasn't consistent schools, but what we did was have schools book consistent times. So we did have Rockhaven, for example, would come and enjoy the ice every single Thursday in a fixed block. So we made sure that we had the appropriate helpers to assist with those wonderful kids. This year, of course, we expect to have 0. And then we are hoping that when the 2021 ice surface is installed, that we can see schools returning. And just for council, this is a reminder that the ice year operates on an ice season basis. So these fees passed will take effect for the ice season next year. We don't increase the fees on our user groups halfway through the 2020 ice season. It tends to follow the school year, if that makes sense.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Any other questions on Parks and Recreation? Councillor Jay Dunbar?
Thank you. It's for Ms. Bittner. Would there be any substantial savings if the outdoor rink, I mean, I don't know what it costs time and staff to you know, put on that ice and keep it and clean it, or have we gone to some sort of onus that if I'm going to use it, me and my kids, we shovel it, or like how is that? I don't see, it's not individual, you know, it's not it probably falls under the whole blanket of cost over at the arena. Or does the ice out on the outdoor rink, is that something separate?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Dunbar, the outdoor rink is actually on Ms. Dent and my radar for this year, where we're going to be doing a deep dive and making sure that we're tabulating time actually down to the hour, as well as the water consumption for that area, so we can provide council with an accurate cost of that facility. However, if I can answer the first part of your question, we are tracking it. What we're able to do is do a read on our water meter before this season starts. And when we do our massive floods, what we can do is actually have Mr. Smith come back and do another reading for us. And then we can basically do that quick math because we know how much water has to go on there. Staff actually bring out our older Zamboni that we have saved in our cold storage. We have that serviced every year. We try not to use our newer Olympia outside. And we can do some really nice hot floods. And that's when you see those really beautiful pictures that we tend to post when the rink is ready. It does a stellar job for quality. And as well, our edger is used outside to take, of course, the edges down so we can provide a safe surface for our skaters. So that's a piece of equipment we're keeping tabs on, because we've noted over the last few years, as we've increased our level of ice quality outside, it's actually wearing out our edger a little bit faster than we anticipated. So we're closely monitoring that this season so we can make sure that our asset management strategy includes an edger when it's due, as well as ongoing maintenance and potentially a rebuild, so we don't have that asset failure.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen. It sounds like you have a good handle on this then.
You're welcome.
And Councillor Pastorero?
And just to add to that, I know, sorry, excuse me, that last year there was a huge outcry when we were even remotely a little bit late on maintaining that outdoor rink. And I foresee this year it will be busier than ever with COVID. So it's a good investment.
And through you, Madam Mayor, if I can make one last comment following Councillor Pastorero. In that case, CAO Scott and I did meet with Algoma Public Health, and we have already reviewed the procedures for the outdoor rink. So when we are ready to put ice in, we are able to provide a safe environment for users, updating our signage and making sure that everything basically follows what Algoma Public Health at the time is going to be requesting of the municipality. So that is on our radar.
And Sue, go ahead.
Just to add one more thing to the discussion for the members of council to keep in mind, the outdoor rink is totally 100% weather dependent. So if the weather is not conducive to putting in ice, ice cannot go in. So just if you're talking to constituents, they need to remember that if it's too warm or too rainy, we just can't put the ice in. It's totally weather dependent. So.
Okay. And I'm not seeing any other hands on the Parks and Recreation. So any questions on animal feeds control? Pam's going to get after me if I miss anybody's hands, so we're ready. User fees for water. Any comments on that spreadsheet?
Obviously, these rates will be adjusted based on the previous discussion of only increasing the water fees by 4%.
And seeing none,
Sorry,
user.
if I can just point out, sorry, Madam Mayor, if I can just point out too, we are proposing a change to how we bill for water and sewer installations, looking more at an at-cost charge as opposed to a flat fee. Some require a lot more work, such as ripping up roads and sidewalks, as opposed to just a more basic installation. So we are looking to change that costing structure to an at-cost. And there are a number of potential new fees that are being proposed. We've done some research across municipalities in the North Shore. Not everybody has meters, but they are still charging for reprints, bill reprints. If people are requesting copies of billing histories, some have a fee to transfer as an admin cost to transfer a water bill balance to the tax roll, and an account setup fee. So there's some potential new fees that are being proposed within the water and sewer department.
Thank you. And building and planning, any questions? Seeing none. Cemetery. And seeing none. Fire. Landfill. And licensing. And last but not least, Public Works. And just a reminder, we will be having a public meeting next Thursday to share our user fees with the public. Moving on to 8.1, the correspondence on the resilience infrastructure funding. Sue?
Yeah, so this was what we were talking about as part of the facilities discussion. This is the ISIP COVID-19 resilience funding, the $100,000 that we will be determining which facility makes most sense to apply for this funding for, probably the town hall, but as we work through the reports from Tulloch and look at the criteria for eligibility for this funding, we will make a final decision as to which facility we will apply for.
Are there any questions on this funding from council? Councillor Wells?
Actually, Mayor Hagman, I'd just like to go back to the public meeting for a moment, if I may.
Sure.
That will be held by Zoom, correct?
Yes.
Now, how are we making sure that the residents of the community are aware of the public meeting? I assume that we'll be using the weekly newsletter, but will there be other forms of communication so people know about participating in the meeting?
It's on the, it will be on the town website.
For people who have a computer.
Sue, would you like to elaborate?
We will use the same means we usually use. So there will be posters going up in the usual places. We will send it out as part of the newsletter. We will get it on the website. We'll have the normal places where we advertise the public meeting.
We'll also advertise on the Instagram account that we have. As we noted for the Hazardous Waste Day, we had more turnout in the means that we did without putting up posters. So I think with some posters and our social media pages, we should be able to contact most people, and hopefully they do have a computer because they'll need it for the Zoom meeting to attend.
And just a question, will this also be on Channel 10?
We will air it as a council meeting normally would,
Right.
just to be able to capture based on the COVID situation.
Great. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Pastorero?
Thanks, Mayor Hagman. Would there also be the potential to get maybe Chris to pick it up in Elliott Lake today? Because maybe he'll report on some of the resolutions we've passed today. And he could throw in that if the town's people wish to have their voice, they can come to our public meeting.
That is a possibility, absolutely. He's always anxious to showcase Blind River. Any other comments from
He's
council?
already been asking me for how much I think our surplus is going to be this year, so.
No doubt. Are there any other questions from council? Seeing none, we've covered the addendum previously, and so we are now up to number 10, and that is motion to adjourn. And I can see you all now. Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor B. Dunbar. Right, we'll definitely let Councillor Roy that he got usurped for sure. It's been really amazing, council. You have been very patient through all of this. I would like to applaud our staff. There is a lot of work that goes behind budgeting, and it's a big effort. So big kudos to our treasurer, Sue Dent, Mark Bender, Karen Bittner, Pam Walsh, and of course, Katie Scott. Thank you all.
I'd also like to note that the rest of the staff as well, it's not just managers that work on this, the entire staff works very diligently on this. So I'd like to thank the entire Town of Blind River staff for their input in the budget.
We'll make sure when we see them that we'll give them kudos as well. Thank you for that. And thanks to everyone. Have a great evening. Betty Ann, I'll see you in an hour on the chamber meeting. Take care.